Welcome to 18th Century Cooking. I'm John Townsend, and we'll be doing let's call it a misleading title, a rice soup right out of the 18th century. Thanks for joining us today. Today's recipe is out of The Universal Cook by John Townsend. This is 1773, I believe. John Townsend in the 18th century, he was the owner of the Greyhound Tavern, and he created this cookbook. A lot of fun. This recipe is called a rice soup, but I don't think it's gonna turn out like a soup. At least when you read the recipe, it doesn't seem like that. But there's only one way to find out. With some of these recipes, we have to make them to figure out what they're actually gonna turn into. So let's get started on this one. In the recipe, he actually says if you're going to be using a pound of rice, you'll need 2 quarts of water. I'm using a half a pound of rice, so we need 1 quart of warm water. I've got a rice, and he calls for a cinnamon stick to be put in at the same time. And it's supposed to cover it and let it simmer until it's soft. So our rice is done, it's cooled off. I need to get the cinnamon stick out of this. And now the recipe calls for adding nutmeg. It says grate half a nutmeg. Of course, we don't have a full recipe here, so we don't need a full quarter or a full half a nutmeg. That should be plenty. There we go. And it says sweeten to taste. Now this is light and fluffy-ish. Rice at this point, but it's not anything close to a soup. And soups we don't generally consider very sweet anyway, so I don't think this is actually going to turn out to be a soup at all. I'm going to go ahead and add some sort of muscovado sugar in here. I don't know what, sweeten to taste. I don't know what it's supposed to taste like yet, so I'm just going to, there, that's what I'm going to call sweetened. Now, I just wanted to, I don't want to break this rice up too much, but I just want to get these things mixed in. I don't know why he called for them to be put in at this point, especially the nutmeg. I might have put that in a little bit sooner. Maybe it would have been overpowering if it was, kind of cooked into it. Even the cinnamon we took out, so it lends that wonderful cinnamon flavor without, putting it directly in there. Now we need this mix of egg yolks. He calls for 3 egg yolks, so I cut this down to basically a full egg and an egg yolk because I still think it needs more liquid, right? So we're gonna whisk up this egg and egg yolk. There we go. And we're gonna add to it some wine. And he doesn't say what kind of wine. I'm guessing a sack. This is like a cooking sherry of the time period, very, very popular. So we're gonna add some sack. Possibly, if we don't want it to be too much of a winey flavor, we might use water here instead. You might want to use a sparkling grape juice, depending on the flavor you want in this. But the traditional, the authentic flavor is a wine flavor. So that's what we're going to put in. Maybe a white wine would be a little less, intense. But that's all the liquid I've got to put in there. That's all I've got to make it into a soup. So I don't think it's gonna be a soup. I think it's like the steaks fried in ale that weren't actually fried. So let's try this. Let's add this into our mix. And we'll pour this in. There we are. And it really just kind of moistens it. And now this goes back over the fire, and he says, bring it to a boil or until it's the right consistency. Well, we've got some egg yolks in here. We wanna get this cooked up anyway. We're probably not going to bring in anything too like a boil, but let's get it heated up anyway. Okay, let's get this egg mixture cooked up. Obviously, we wanted to cool that rice off so that it didn't cook the eggs and make this into sort of scrambled eggs. And that's the one thing we are concerned with here. The recipe calls for it to be slowly heated and bring it up to a slow heat. So right now it's it's almost liquidy enough. I'm afraid that that when it starts to actually get the heat, it's gonna get very thick. So the recipe says to heat this until it gets to the proper thickness. Of course, we don't know what the proper thickness is, so my rule of thumb here is get this to the point where, and I might have to cool this down a little bit, Get this to the point where the eggs, I know, are not raw. And then I'm gonna call that good enough because it's already pretty thick, especially way too thick to be called a soup. Well, there is our completed rice soup. Again, as you can see, its consistency is nothing like a soup. Now, I'm not sure how much liquid you would have to add to this recipe to get to a soup consistency, at least what we would call a soup. A lot more. And of course, it's sweet, it's not savory, so it's certainly not what we generally would consider a soup, I suppose. So I'm just gonna say it is what it is. Now, maybe 18th century rice was different enough that it didn't absorb all that water, but I don't believe so. I think it was almost exactly like what I used for this particular recipe. So, but let's see what it tastes like. That's the important part, right? Well, we have this wonderful cinnamon and nutmeg flavoring in here and sweetness. You know, if I wanted this to be a sweet thing, I might add more sugar to make it sweet. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things. We'll have to let it grow on me. I'll have to try it out a couple different times. I don't think he had any salt in this. This might use a little bit of salt to bring out some of these flavors. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope you get a chance to try it out, to experiment with it. If you do experiment with it, I would love to hear about what it turns out like for you, or if you already have a similar dish like this that you cook in the family. Hey, chime in down in the comments section. I'd love to hear about that. And I want to thank everyone for all your amazing support, all the comments that we get, all the great subscriptions and the people that share our videos. Really, it is such a wonderful support, and I enjoy all those comments. So thank you so much for all you do. And I want to thank you for coming along today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.